Welcome to the Insights and Innovators podcast from Market Research Institute International, where top research professionals share practical insights and innovation strategies to help researchers deliver more business impact and earn their strategic seat at the table. Today's episode is sponsored by Fieldwork. Fieldwork is the qualitative research partner that recruits respondents according to client specs and hosts in-person, remote, or hybrid research sessions to uncover insights for brand and business impact. Whether in our state-of-the-art facilities or online, clients can focus on the research. We'll do the rest. Now here's your host for today's episode.
I'm John Lass, president of Sports and Leisure Research Group and past president of the Insights Association and MRII. On today's episode, we welcome in one of the authors of a fascinating new book that addresses the relevance challenge that market research is confronted with as it seeks a more prominent place in securing a rightful place at the strategic table, particularly as the voice of the customer. Brett Townsend is SVP of Strategy at Quester, the capstone of a distinguished career that's seen him serve in executive marketing roles at leading consumer products brands, as a past chair of the Insights Association, and even as a sportscaster before moving to the research agency side. Wow, Brett, that really sounds a lot like my career arc, even down to the sports broadcaster part. Anyway, Brett, we've also both done our fair share of writing and public speaking about marketing and insights, but you've taken it a step further in recently publishing the book Research on the Brink. The book's received rave reviews from many industry luminaries, and today we're going to draft off of the new book to take a hard look at the new imperatives for the research professional. Brett, it's great to have you on Insights and Innovators.
It is great to be here. Thanks, John.
So I want to get to the meat of it. I want to start with, the foundation and inspiration for the book is really where insights are today. How did we get to this precarious position, and what do we need? What are the critical steps needed to evolve the industry?
Yeah, our feeling here is that the position we're in it's our fault, basically. I mean, there's obviously, you could say that there's CEOs and C-level executives that don't quite grasp the power of insights, but honestly, most of where we're at is our self-inflicted wounds, basically. So I think it easily starts off by saying that we still take too much of an academic approach to insights. Our industry was born from clinicians and academics whose goal was to prove viability of methodologies, not being responsible for business results. And we continue to use the same methodologies and techniques that were developed in the 40s and 50s, and maybe even earlier, that yielded those same types of emphasis on methodology instead of on business results. So I think that's the first thing. And then another thing is that we are so enamored with data and charts and graphs and numbers and information that we a lot of times don't give insight. We really don't come to the table with things that are truly consumer-centric insights. We come up with data statements or things that we think are insightful, but they haven't been over the years. And so that's kind of built up to the point where a lot of businesses don't think they're getting the kind of value from us because we're just giving them numbers and things. And then I think the last one, I mean, there's probably several, but I would say the last one I'll highlight is that we traditionally have been very siloed. We understand market research, but very little else around business. We aren't known for our business acumen, understanding how the work that we do affects every part of the business. And, just from personal experience, insights that I've done over the years affect not just marketing, sales, product development, but supply chain, post-sales customer service, all these areas that traditionally we haven't known anything about. And so I think that lack of business acumen has caused us to be seen as insights people that may be disconnected from the reality of business.
Yeah, and another point of view that I know we both share and that you've talked about in the book is just this kind of archaic viewpoint of consumer insights as a cost center.
Yes.
You made the point that it can evolve to a profit-generating asset. I actually remember doing a seminar on this very topic at a market research event a number of years ago. And that was the exact model that I deployed at the Golf Digest companies before spinning off that division into my current firm 16 years ago. Elaborate and share your point of view on that philosophy and how today's market research departments can move into that place.
Yeah, and I've had similar success to you where we were able to get at least the product development portion of my budget at Electrolux moved into not into working dollars, not non-working dollars, which basically meant it was contributing to sales. So, but the way we did that is, first of all, we have to start tracking the success of our work, something again we historically have not done, nor have we taken credit for things. So it's interesting how many great products and marketing campaigns are born from great insights, and sales and marketing and innovation take credit for all of it, and we rarely take credit for it. And so it comes to end of year review time, and we typically haven't really touted the financial success of the work that we've done. And so I think that's kind of as what led to us being viewed as a cost center and put into non-working dollars. So the first thing is we have to track the success of our work. We have to track the success of new products that we help develop, of the lift from marketing campaigns, or just the sales increase, or even if our brand is increasing in awareness and consideration and those things. That is all part of what we do. So we have to track it. We have to take credit for it. And we have to just kind of market ourselves. It's really kind of interesting how we help companies market their products better, but we're terrible at marketing what we do. And so we have to not be, beating our chest all the time, or being the kind of annoying person that's always saying, hey, look at me, look at me. But as an industry, we just have to do a better job of taking credit for the work that we do, and not just saying, hey, we did that, but hey, we brought in this amount of revenue for the company.
Yeah, I so embrace that. I mean, there's a couple clients I know that also kind of take it on the other side and talk about how much they saved their companies from
That's
making
another
bad
reason.
decisions. But I'll take it even a step further, and I want to get back to the book. But we actually sold research. When I was in a media company, I mean, we recognized that the consumer was the asset, that the person who was engaging in our media was the product, and we packaged research into what we were actually delivering. So, this ad campaign that was, $1 million campaign now got a couple $100,000 worth of research put into it, and literally had revenue. It's certainly an opportunity that I think more MRDs need to take advantage of. And I think that's, kind of goes into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is this whole emphasis that you place on consumer centricity and driving both the value of insights and securing the rightful strategic place that insights needs to have in organizations. It goes back to a point I made in our introduction about how, as insights professionals, we really are the voice of the customer. How does one drive buy-in to that positioning, and what advice do you have for senior executives that can help them set a consumer-centric culture?
I think it just starts with that attitude. Consumer centricity for an entire company has to start from the top. It's not as if consumer insights can create this desire for an entire corporation to be consumer centric. I think that is something that has to be set by senior leaders, to put the responsibility of the consumer in the hands of the entire company, not just in consumer insights and maybe a little bit in marketing. So I think that's the first thing, is it does need to come up. It does need to come from the top. But what we can do in insights is that we have to constantly be talking about the consumer in very human, emotional terms. Instead of talking about them in demographic terms or in generic terms of the consumer, or different things, we have to really talk about them as people and really empathize with them and stress the empathy for the situations they're in. So, for instance, work that I've done in the past with the Dollar Channel when I was at PepsiCo, the kind of empathy I'm talking about is when we were realizing that dollar store shoppers many months have to decide whether or not they're going to pay an electric or a gas bill versus eating. Or they have to park their car halfway through the month because they can't afford gas to drive to work for the rest of the month. And so it's those kinds of things that we really feel for the consumer. And we're communicating that and talking about them as people, and taking the focus off of products and really looking at solutions. um, focusing on consumer needs and consumer conflict that we help them overcome rather than just putting together packages of products or promotions or things like that, or do divergent thinking about, okay, how many possible uses do we have of this particular product versus some kind of convergent thinking about what combination of things can we develop that will help the consumer. So it really is a mind shift and attitude things. Let's talk about sports. So many people talk about sports. Defense is attitude mostly. And I think that's what we kind of have in consumer insights, is that so much of it is just attitude, and mindset can change so much about what we do in our industry.
It's definitely a philosophy and a vantage point that I think can really help insights professionals in the sense of getting that seat at the table, which is, I guess it's a cliche that we've used for a long time, but in some respects, Stan Stanonathan and I did an earlier podcast on this series that was really fascinating. And obviously, Stan is legendary for what he did in a number of consumer products companies. And it was talking about finding really what was the so what behind things, and being somebody that had the answer that helped deliver that seat at the table. We both kind of came at it, though, starting perhaps on the marketing side, or at least spending time on the marketing side, and that made it maybe a little bit easier to think holistically when we got to the agency side. But there are certainly things that insights professionals can do who haven't had that background that can give them the confidence to secure that seat. Any advice that you would have for that?
Yeah, I'll add something to what you said. Not only is it the so what that we have to do better, but it's the now what. And so we've been really great at the what, obviously, which is the data and the information, translating into what does that mean? It's what you were talking about with the so what. And then, but the now what is, what do we need to go do about it? So many times we can have a good insight, but we won't make recommendations. We won't say this is what we should do, almost because I think we're afraid sometimes to be so bold as to think we could tell a CEO what to go do. But many of the CEOs, that's what they want. They want those outcomes. They want that activation guidance from us because they don't know anything. And the best ones realize they don't know anything.
Yeah, no, I still remember early in my career standing in the office of a CEO, and he basically looked at my 24-year-old person and said, "What should I do?" And I was blown out, but I answered. And I think the more that insights professionals can do that, realize they don't have to be right all the time, but at least they can facilitate thinking, the better it is. I
And
often,
to your point, John, we don't have to be 100% sure about anything. Like, I
right.
think in the modern day of insights, I've had CEOs say, look, 75% is fine, 80% is fine.
Yeah.
Just tell me. And then, like, kind of similar to you, I've presented things that aren't 100%, aren't totally crystal clear, but given the triangulation and the way that we kind of group the story together from all the insights that we have, I've had a CEO and CMO look at me over the years and say, hey, okay, Brett, given what you know, are you comfortable with this outcome, and are you comfortable with the direction you're telling us to go? I'm like, yes, I absolutely am. Understanding that it's not perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it goes back in some ways to a comment you made earlier about, we've become, or historically the industry was so fixated on process and academic grounding and getting it right. We don't have to have the exact answer. We don't have to have precision. I mean, margin of error is assumed, but it's uncovering that story, that narrative that you
Yeah,
speak, that I think
we're,
is
we're,
really critical.
we're not defending dissertations. We're not, getting up there and trying to prove viability of certain things, which require that kind of rigor like it was with our forefathers. I mean, that's not what we're doing. But to your other part of the question about what can a younger professional do, you know, this is gonna sound very funny and somewhat self-serving, I think, but that's one of the reasons why we wrote the book, was because we didn't want it to be philosophical. We wanted it to be very practical. We wanted it to be easy to read, and most importantly, easy to implement. And so the things that we put in the book, we're not saying that they're the best things, or that the only things, or that we're 100% right, but we wrote the book so that anyone at any level could take some of the things that we have suggested for improvement and implement them immediately. So just things like being focused more on insight, learning how to have better empathy for a consumer, developing better stories, how to tell better stories that have that are centered around the consumer conflict and really give a direction of where to go at the end, focusing on outcomes, realizing that our jobs first and foremost are not to do research but to make companies money. Just all of these little things. I think, pushing back, saying no is a big thing. There's a lot of bad research that we do at the behest of our coworkers, and we don't say anything. Mainly, I think, out of self-preservation, and we don't want to rock the boat or worried about our jobs because there's been so many cutbacks in market research and consumer insights for the last 5-10 years, and sometimes we're afraid for our jobs, and so we don't know what the implications are. But there's all these things. I think just pick something and start with that is really the best advice.
So it gets us thinking about the keys to success for younger professionals that may be listening to this and considering, where the industry is heading. How does it differ from, when we first got involved or even 10 years ago? What advice and essential skills do you look for research professionals to bring in, both from the agency side and the internal MRD side?
So going back to my corporate life, I did not care if someone had a lot of market research experience. I didn't care if they were really good at methodologies because I didn't need that. Number one, I could teach it if I needed to. Two, our agencies did most of that heavy lifting anyway. I needed people who were great persuaders, people who were great relationship builders, because Insights works cross-functionally, probably more than any other department in a company. I needed people who were good storytellers, good listeners, and people who had experience in other parts of the business outside of Insights, because they were the end users of Insights. They knew what was effective. And so to bring that understanding into consumer insights, it made us better because we knew how to better deliver what our internal constituents needed. So it was funny. I saw something from Simon Sinek a while ago where, these things are considered soft skills, persuasion and listening and all those other things. And he said, no, they're not soft skills anymore. These are human skills that everybody should have. And so I think we don't need to be continually churning out people that are great at methodology and great at writing questionnaires or things like that, but people who understand business in a better sense. And it makes us far better at our jobs because we can be much more proactive in what we're doing because we understand business. We get people listening to us more because we've built great relationships and we're persuasive. So it's those kinds of things I think that really could move the needle.
Yeah, I often reference it as kind of taking an ownership mentality, which is something that I always subscribed to even before I was a company owner. In the final moments we have, I know we're just scratching the surface, and it's a common theme with these episodes because you just want to go on forever because there's so much good stuff that people are talking about. Give me your thoughts on the next 10, 15 years, whether it's the future of AI, which seems to be, if I had $1 for every time people talked about that, I could retire if I wanted to again, this broader definition of a more consultative shift for the insights profession. What are we looking at? What is the industry's landscape going to be like, 15 years from today?
What's interesting is that I hear a lot of people talking about the future of insights, and there's webinars and there's things about it. And my thought is, unless we change and evolve, the future is going to look very much like the present and like the past. Because unless we move past this mentality that we have, that it's methodology driven, that it's academically driven, that kind of thing, it's going to look very similar to what it is now. So I think the way it can be better is, let's briefly chat about AI. AI is already a commodity. There are so many companies now that have AI data collection tools that AI is the new internet from the mid 90s when that came around. And so we're just shifting data collection. We shifted it from phone and paper to the internet, and now we're shifting things to AI. So it's already a commodity. I was at conferences this year and everybody's talking about, we've got this new AI data collection tool. I'm like, well, guess what? So does everybody.
Exactly.
So AI is not it. And what I would say is that if you view your job in consumer insights as doing methodologies and doing data analytics, then AI will take your job. But as we've talked about, consumer insights is not about any of that. It's about consumer empathy, consumer centricity, consumer understanding, storytelling. AI can't do that because there's no emotion, there's none of that in data. There's no empathy in AI or anything like that. So I think using AI as a tool, just like we use the internet, is like everything else, to be better at what we do, and to do the mundane stuff, to free us up to do the important things. I think that's the big future. And then I think also, just the more we develop this business acumen, the more we become more proactive partners, the future of insights could be really great, because then we're business leaders. We're not just, as we said, cost centers or people that are order takers or things like that, but that we're true strategic partners. And, the BCG maturity model, where we are sources of competitive advantage for our companies. I think that is true in some cases. In most cases, it's not. And so I think the more we can kind of, again, evolve away from our past, becoming more source agnostic about where our insights come from. Like, sometimes we're so arrogant to think that it's not an insight unless we're asking the questions. Just kind of this mindset shift that we can do things more efficiently, better, smarter, and evolve the way we think. Then I think the future in 10 to 15 years is that we really are strategic partners, business leaders, and companies can be a lot more insightful with the insights they do, with the new products they develop, with the way they talk to consumers.
I'll close it. It's so well said, and I'll close it with a line that I've used a lot, maybe even on an earlier episode of this podcast, as I have been known to say sometimes to clients and others. Where we evolve as insights professionals, the only difference between us, and you mentioned BCG, so I'll pick on them, between us and consultants, is we're probably a lot more cost effective. Brett, thank you so much for being on Insights and Innovators. This has been a terrific conversation.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining the Insights and Innovators podcast from Market Research Institute International. Click subscribe to never miss an episode, and visit us at mrii.org for more market research insights.